So my name's Morad, and by the way, there's a big screen here and I keep forgetting to look at it. It's a bit like karaoke. So
that's for later.
That's for later. So we've been obviously honoured to be asked to talk, and I guess our position isn't necessarily as experts, but we're just kind of really describing some of the things that we've tried within our service. We have a couple of different areas that we cover, and I want to talk about them in a bit more detail in a bit. But basically, what I want to do is just introduce the service. Introduce essentially what the population is across Bournemouth, across Southampton, and then really we can just kind of go through a couple of examples of some of the things that we do, and then look at some of the lessons learned, but you can read the slide. So we know essentially in the press, in the news, it's kind of come to the fore more recently that students, particularly across the country, are a group that needs attention. We know that obviously there's the white paper which has looked at those issues. There was a survey, there was the 0 to 25 plan, and essentially we know that this population is challenging because we're generally IAPT services which are in one particular place to meet a particular need, and we know that students are often in a period of transition. Student life is a transition from your home. Suddenly you just kind of moved into uni, and it turns out that it's not quite what you were expecting, or at least it wasn't what I was expecting anyway. That means that there's kind of increasing complexity nowadays as well. So we also know from the IAPT manual, IAPT services that are based in areas where there is higher education institutions should therefore develop an assessment and treatment protocol that provides students with equitable access to treatment, which is quite a challenge. We obviously have populations that move in and out, and I know it was mentioned earlier about how we can, for example, use technology to essentially meet that need, and we can talk about how we've tried to do that. So, of course, students don't live in the area for the whole year. It takes time to engage people. Often they've moved from a different area. We don't have the notes. These are some of the things that we encounter in IAPT services anyway, but more so. We need to engage students as well. We're not trained in media. Often we're trained in how to deliver psychological interventions, and suddenly we're met with this need to engage a student population and be hip. I think that's the word. I'm not, obviously. There are a few different things that we need to consider. We have 2 universities, actually 4 universities that we cover, yep. But 2 university towns or cities. So in Bournemouth we have Bournemouth University, and we also have Bournemouth Arts, and then 22 colleges. So we're talking about a population of about 22,000 people. Southampton. In
Southampton we have 2 quite prominent universities. We've got the University of Southampton and we have Southampton Solent, and within the city border that we cover we've got about 7 colleges, but it's about 36,000 people who sort of come into the city for quite a short period of time.
Absolutely. And the challenge that we face is that, for example, in Bournemouth, we're fortunate because of the way that services are made up. And I'll come on to that because I'm jumping ahead, aren't I?
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's what I was going to say, actually. We're in a kind of a privileged position. So I work for Dorset Healthcare, but actually I'm based at Bournemouth University in their wellbeing team. So quite lucky, we've got good liaison with the sort of student wellbeing advisors within the university and sort of the network there. So able to sort of talk with be on board with some of the university policies and be involved with the projects with them, but also network with sort of our local IAPT service as well. In terms of how we engage our students, it's an evolving thing because actually they're flooded with information, whether that be from kind of academic staff, whether that be about kind of living, about kind of coming to a new area. They're flooded with lots of different information. So actually it's quite hard to promote awareness at just one period. So we have to look at sort of different ways of capturing their attention and looking at that. So we do lots of promotion and networking, you know, through kind of the academic year. We try to be involved in events not just at Freshers' Fair, but kind of World Mental Health Day, Student Mental Health Day, and be involved in as many different things as we can online and, you know, at actual fairs. We also kind of try to be involved in other kind of projects in the community, and I know in Southampton they're involved in sort of anti-stigma and suicide prevention events and are involved in that. We also try to keep our websites updated so that students are able to kind of easily access information about kind of the student wellbeing service and the IAPT services as well. We also, we'll talk a bit more about them, but we're looking at online modalities. So we're looking at things like webinars, Attend Anywhere, and other options that can reach students out of term. So if they are going back to their kind of hometown or city for a period at Christmas or Easter or over the summer, that we can still work with them. So we're working with across both Southampton and Bournemouth. We've got an agreement with the local GPs that they can stay registered in our area so that we can continue some work, and the GPs are happy to manage risk. So that's been quite a good win for us in keeping that continuity for students. We've got a student leaflet, and we also have student-specific venues. So we invite sort of the IAPT teams to come into sort of the university to use, so they can provide CBT on campus, and I think Southampton do the same.
So we kind of alluded to it. The services are set up a little bit differently. So we're Steps to Wellbeing, but obviously when we cover Bournemouth, we are also part of Dorset Healthcare. Within Dorset Healthcare, it's fairly unique actually in the sense that Dorset Healthcare also runs a University Wellbeing service, which is a Step 1.5 service, stealing your thunder a little bit. Essentially, that service has existed for a long time. It's been there for about 30 years, I think. So, you know, obviously significantly longer than us, who have been around for 10 years. One of the things that we found, though, is as Dorset Healthcare took over the contract and the design of the service, we were able to essentially implant wellbeing practitioners, psychological wellbeing practitioners, and in fact their assessments were very similar to the assessments that we undertake within the IAPT services, and we were able to essentially map the path across services. So it was much easier for us to link together and talk the same language, to the extent now actually where obviously you're on IAPTIS as well. Yeah. We're not being paid to say that. With Southampton, it's slightly different.
Yeah, we are. So although Southampton actually has lots of different sort of voluntary providers, and it actually has 4 NHS providers just within the city itself. So we're all doing our own different thing, but actually we've built up the partnerships over the years that I will talk about, because I think it's really crucial that although we're not run the same, which is probably the same for most other areas, as they are so unique in Bournemouth, but actually we've still been able to build up those working relationships.
Absolutely.
So a little bit about sort of student wellbeing. I've already mentioned that we are run by sort of Dorset Healthcare, and Morad's right in that we provide, as a way of looking at it, sort of 1.5, you know, we're in between the GP and an IAPT service, so it's more around kind of short-term talking support, as we call it. So we run drop-ins so that if students have queries about what they can do or where they can go to for their sort of emotional health, they can just come in and ask questions. We don't have any, they don't have to have a set appointment. We are involved a lot more in sort of health promotion and kind of wellbeing advice, so looking at how students can maintain their wellbeing rather than getting to the stage where they need support is one of our sort of priorities, so kind of very much about early intervention. And we kind of link in a lot with the university, and I think they like that link with the NHS services, because then we build bridges with sort of the community mental health teams and other kind of the eating disorders team, and we kind of have that kind of bridge the gap between the sort of the university and that. yeah, so we work together. So those are a few things.
Yeah. So we're an IAPT service. You know, we take self-referrals. We have connected systems, which is, I guess, fairly kind of unique. So it's kind of difficult to perhaps copy some of the things that we do compared with, say, some of the things that Southampton are doing. But of course, we're talking about it. We are able, for example, to use the same rooms in the university and co-locate. We also co-deliver courses. I think we've got an example if we've got enough time, I'm not sure. We co-deliver courses so that actually that there is kind of harmony across some of the programs that we deliver, and we're all using the same language. Of course, we use online options such as SilverCloud, IESO, etc. There are other digital therapy providers available as well. What we have done is, since we've adjusted the pathway, there are, we've looked at the direct referrals because we have a direct referral process. I think you're talking a bit more about the direct referral process.
Yeah, so we started this actually October of last year, and that was before we had moved over to IAPT. So we worked with our kind of teams to look at a way that we can sort of assess students, but sort of transition their care over to Steps2wellbeing without it being too timely for them, because the nature of a term time is, you know, perhaps sort of 10 weeks at a time. It's kind of key to kind of engage them as soon as we could. So we're knowing that if we're taking an assessment, we're actually gathering that into a referral and ourselves referring over to Steps2wellbeing so that they could then pick it up. It's now a lot easier because we are on IAPT and we can just send a IAPT number and all our information is in one place, so they're able to pick that up. We've got sort of consent to share documents so that the students have to sign up to this, of course, but actually we found engagement has been really good. So you'll see at the bottom, 81% of students have engaged with this process compared to sort of 74% before we had the pathway in. We're limited in the way that we could look at the data because the students we looked at had to have the label ticked for being a student at Bournemouth University, but nonetheless we felt that it's been good so far, and we're continuing to monitor how that's working. We also co-deliver a webinar. It's just kind of looking at sort of well-being. We've run it once before and we're due to start again we've got a course starting on the 24th of October, and that's to look at sort of a way of sort of reaching students. Rather than go through this, the next slide actually has a little...
Sorry, do you want me to carry on?
Yeah, the next slide has a little clip of what it looks like. It sounds like it might be quite loud, so I'll just let it do the talking. Coming in.
Fingers and ears.
Yeah.
But our question really through these courses is to think, how does that apply to you? And then how can you apply that to your day-to-day life and sort of building?
Yeah, so if you can see that we are sort of, the webinar is set up in a way that you can see a little video of us and a PowerPoint. But the important part is students can interact with that and ask us questions as we're going along. So we're in early days of kind of evaluating that, but we're looking at not just running it in term time, but across holiday periods as well.
And I think it's worth saying, I know we've kind of, James was alluding to how far we are at the moment in terms of, kind of the NHS and IAPT services, and actually it's quite a challenge even to get a webinar running, quite frankly, within trusts. I'm sure you'll probably tend to find that IAPT services tend to be the kind of vanguard of technology within your mental health services generally. So it's a bit of an issue when you're talking about webinars now compared with, us having discovered VR, like 20 years ago. So we're just glad to have that at this stage.
Well, we don't have it currently.
Oh, okay,
our internet's not strong enough to hold a webinar, which is the bane of probably Joel's life. But we can't run a webinar. We just borrow Bournemouth's, and I think that's the benefit though of the webinars, that we run pan Dorset. So although we are all within different sort of buildings and hubs and communities, that we are offering something that is the same across the patch, really, isn't it, to all of us? But suppose thinking about then Southampton, we are in our own little bubble in a way. We are commissioned by Dorset Healthcare, but we are the only service outside of Dorset. So we sit on our own little city walls, but we are then obviously working pan Dorset across some of the areas. But we really looked at, I suppose, at that working that with having the wellbeing services set up long time in Bournemouth and a long time in the Southampton universities, that we saw quite early on to the setup of IAPT, was we need to be there. I think I attended a conference yesterday in Birmingham, and Maurice just mentioned it, but that co-location, that's something that's been so vital to us, I think, across all our services, that's just really helped to build the networks and relationships between us. We also attend Freshers' Fairs and their wellbeing events, and we talk, just have regular catch-ups just with their staff as well, which really works. We, obviously digital, we have web referrals. However, in Dorset, we've had it for quite a long time, haven't you, web referrals? When we initially set them up in Southampton, it went mad and it really exploded. So we had to sort of really carefully monitor it, but because of the student population, I think it was a large part of that within Southampton, and so it's a young population, but it's something that we have, you know, up and running, and I would say so 80% are self-referrals, but probably about 70% of them are actually coming through the webs, whether that be through healthcare professionals or through clients themselves. But we also offer, the same as the Dorset services, a range of therapeutic modalities, so that's online, telephone, face-to-face, local clinics. And as you mentioned, that I think that link we have with the GPs, wasn't it? Yeah. Following students becoming a lot more prevalent in the news, that the GPs in both our areas, I think, really took notice of it and thought we need to do something, because the frustration of students not being seen quick enough, not being seen while they're in the city, you know, they're going home, they're going away, and actually both of our cities sort of looked and thought this can't carry on. So having that agreement, I think, has made a massive difference to our operating, hasn't it?
Sorry, should I?
Oh, yeah, please, thanks. But some of the things we possibly do slightly differently, because obviously we don't have the unique, wonderful pathway they do have, but we do run a specific assessment clinic at both of the universities, so that staff and clients can be accessed quicker and more local to them. We run a specific Step 3 high intensity CBT group, which I'll go on to a bit more in a moment.
We might not have time.
Oh, well, we've got so short on time. Do you want to skip on? That's probably the more important bit, isn't it? There we go. But CBT, this might be something of interest to you, so it's a specific high-intensity CBT course that's run within the term times at both universities, and that students from either university can access. We've about to start it again now for the fourth year, but we've run 6 courses so far. And if you click onto the next slide, it just gives you a bit of an idea of some of the content. So it's really targeting those really specific student needs, but also working as peer support for the students in their areas, which we've seen really positive. And it's just some lovely little comments for them to talk about, which you can see on the slides.
So I get we've got quite a lot to go through. So there are a few lessons learned, and obviously we'll have access to the slide packs. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about the top tips then, really, or the lessons learned?
I suppose main thing for us was about, as you mentioned, that labelling, but really being able to access the students and identify them really quickly on. So working with our admin teams and our assessment teams to make sure that that's there. But actually, I suppose from both sides, it's having that service management, service lead directive on things. So although therapists are wanting to take things forward, actually having that proactive strategic planning from the service lead, driving those clinics forward, driving the Freshers' Fairs forward, you know, keeping the funding for things like that going. But actually having clear ideas of what both services run, so knowing who's best for what areas really, and just keep those working relationships. We have link workers in all our areas, so there's targeted staff that they can go to, and people know, you know, who they can speak to about things. And it's just some maybe our top tips.
Yeah.
See, quickly.
So there are a few more evaluations that we need to run. We do need to think about how we run our waitlist and prioritisations, because obviously we have a transient population, and that's part of the things that we need to consider as part of the IAPT manual as well. It's something that has been addressed before. We can't necessarily meet it all through digital means. There are further specific student-specific groups and adapted courses to particular needs of those populations. To be honest, we were really kind of hoping that AI would be a little bit further on at this point, so that we could actually maybe use some of the power of that to help us. And you know, again, there's the agreeableness of some of the things that we use, such as VR and such as some of the digital options anyway. But also, you know, continue to pay attention to the IAPT manual. Right, that's it for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.